The town of Dry Creek always woke slow, like a tired horse, reluctant to pull the reins of another day. Wind carried the scent of dust, pine, and coal smoke from the railway that cut through the valley. Most folks paid little mind to strangers, stepping off trains, but the morning he arrived, people stopped in their tracks. Some paused on porches, others from behind saloon windows. A few even stepped out into the street. There was something about him. The broad shoulders, the long black hair wet with rain, the stern look in his dark eyes, the deep red beads around his neck. He walked like someone used to being watched, yet burdened by it. The sheriff called him a wild man. The preacher simply lowered his gaze. The children stared with awe. No one knew what tribe he came from, only that he crossed the valley alone and wounded. He did not speak much. Just handed a folded note to the town clerk, written by a missionary somewhere west of the canyon. It explained that he needed medical attention and shelter for a short while. The note was respectful, yet firm, as if whoever wrote it believed this man deserved more care than judgment. The townsfolk agreed he could stay at the old clinic by the creek. It was small, mostly used for miners and cattle hands. Only one nurse was working that week after the physician left for a supply run. She was new to Dry Creek, quiet, modest, wearing white cotton uniforms sewn by her own hands. She spent most days tending fevers, cleaning wounds, or helping ranch families. No one in town knew much about her past, only that she traveled far to escape a life that had grown too heavy. She did not expect her next patient to be a muscular Apache warrior with scars across his chest and arms, nor did she expect the silence in the clinic to feel so loud once he sat down. His presence filled the room in a way she could not explain. She tried to keep her hands steady while placing a basin of warm water beside him. He watched her with calm eyes, not unkind, only observant, as if studying a creature far more fragile than himself. The rain outside slowed to a soft tapping while she unwrapped the cloth band around his ribs. The wound looked like a knife cut, long and deep, but already starting to mend. He allowed her to clean it without any sound of pain. Most men would have flinched or cursed. He only breathed slow, unbothered, as if pain was a familiar companion. She noticed small details, a slight tremble in his fingers, a bruise along his neck, smoke-scented hair, the fine craftsmanship of the beads around his chest. She wanted to ask how he got hurt, but the words caught in her throat. He was powerful in a quiet way, not reckless or proud, just strong, like the mountains beyond the valley. By late afternoon, the clinic filled with steam from boiling towels. His temperature dropped, color returned to his face, and his breathing steadied. When she saw how exhausted he was, she suggested a warm bath to ease his muscles. The old iron tub had not been used in months, but she scrubbed it clean, heated water over the stove, and filled it until steam rose and fogged the windows. Room felt warmer than usual, almost like summer had stepped inside. He stepped into the bath slowly and lowered himself beneath the water. His long hair floated around his shoulders as his body relaxed. He closed his eyes, head leaning back against the tub, muscles still tense but slowly softening. She stood to the side, drying her hands, ready to step out and give him privacy. She attended many patients, but never someone like him. Never someone who carried both danger and peace in equal measure. For a moment, she turned her back to tidy the counter. When she looked again, he was watching her. Not rude, not bold, just curious, as if trying to understand why she kept so much distance. She froze in place. The air between them felt charged with something unspoken. He lifted one hand from the water, droplets rolling down his forearm, steam rising around his skin. His voice was low, gentle, and carried a hint of amusement, like he was speaking softly so as not to frighten her. "You have never seen one before. Have you her breath caught?" She did not know what he meant. Maybe he spoke of warriors from his people, or scars earned in battles far from her peaceful clinic, or simply a man unashamed of his own presence. She tried to answer, but no sound came out. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the edge of the tub, muscles outlined by the glow of sunset pouring through the window. The steam made the room look like a dream. She felt her pulse race, unsure whether to step closer or run. He studied her eyes, not her body, and there was something respectful in the way he waited, almost patient, almost kind. He lowered his voice even more, like a whisper meant only for her. "Are you afraid of Mesh?" Shook her head, though she was unsure what she felt. Maybe fear, maybe fascination, maybe both. He nodded back, slow, understanding. He turned away slightly, resting again, giving her space. Yet his next words carried a weight that shook her more than his stare. "I am not here to harm you, but I am not here by choice either." She frowned, stepping closer, hands clasped nervously. He closed his eyes and exhaled, as if holding back something heavy. "There are men coming. They wanted me dead in the canyon. They might come here next." Her heart sank. The clinic felt suddenly smaller. The world outside felt unsafe. The room was quiet except for the bubbling water and the creak of old floorboards under her shoes. She opened her mouth to ask why anyone would hunt him. But before she could speak, he opened his eyes again and looked at her with a seriousness she had never seen in any patient. "When they arrive, you must decide whether you stand with them or with Mesh." Stepped back, startled, gripping the fabric of her uniform. The light from the window dimmed as clouds rolled over the sun, turning the room a darker shade of gold. He waited, watching her reaction, steam swirling between them. She tried to breathe steady but failed. She had never been asked to choose sides in anything. She came to Dry Creek to escape conflict, not step into it. Yet something in his voice felt honest. Something in his presence felt like a storm waiting to break. She pressed a hand over her heart, unsure. And that was when a distant sound echoed through the valley. Hoofbeats, heavy, fast. Riders. Approaching the town, the warrior's expression hardened. He slowly rose in the tub, water rolling down his chest. Eyes fixed on the window as the sound grew louder. She stood frozen, not knowing whether to lock the door, call for help, or place herself between him and whoever approached. Outside, shadows moved across the dirt road. The decision she made next would change her life. The sound of hoofbeats shook her nerves. They were not slow or polite like a traveler making his way into town. They were fast, hard, and determined. Dust rose outside the clinic windows, casting moving shadows along the wall. The Apache warrior did not flinch. Instead, he stood there, dripping and silent, listening to every strike of hooves hitting the dry ground. His sharp eyes narrowed as if he already knew who was coming. She rushed to the window, her heart pounding. So hard she thought the warrior might hear it echo in the room. Through the fogged glass, she spotted 3 riders, dark hats pulled low, rifles strapped across their backs. They were not cattle hands either, strangers, dangerous ones. They slowed their horses near the sheriff's office, scanning the buildings around them. The nurse stepped back from the window, breath shaky. The warrior grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his waist, but even then, his presence seemed larger than the room. He moved closer, placing a hand on the wooden wall as if feeling vibrations through the boards. "They tracked me for a long time," he said quietly, voice deep and steady. "They hunt for money. They hunt for blood." Her thoughts stumbled. A bounty hunter. She had heard stories in the newspapers, but those tales always felt distant, like fiction meant to thrill folks who lived easier lives. Now the danger stood only a few steps away. She tried to speak, but words tangled in her throat. "Why do they want you?" she finally managed to ask. He looked at her with an expression she could not read, as if deciding how much truth to share. "Because I refused to serve their greed. Because I protected my people. Because I know something they fear." His eyes drifted to the window again. The town outside seemed calm on the surface, yet tension pulsed like a wire stretched tight. He stepped toward his shirt resting on a chair, slipping it over his shoulders with careful movements. She noticed the scars again, long history written on his body. He reached for his necklace of tribal beads, holding it like it was something sacred. She wondered how someone so feared could also carry the weight of something meaningful and gentle in his heart. The riders tied their horses and walked slowly, scanning every building. One spit tobacco onto the road, while another adjusted his hat and pointed toward the small clinic. "They are coming here," she whispered. The warrior nodded, but he did not move to escape. He crossed the room and leaned close to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I owe you respect, nurse. You helped me when no one else would, so I will give you the truth. I can stop them, but you must choose whether this clinic remains a place of peace or becomes a battlefield. Her knees weakened. She had spent her life healing, not harming. The idea of violence in this room made her stomach twist, but she also saw fear hiding under his calm face. Like someone protecting a secret that could cost lives, she asked him one more thing. Needing to understand, what did you leave behind? His stare softened slightly. Family, he said. A mother who raised me strong. A younger brother who thinks with fire instead of patience. A home that must remain hidden. If these men succeed, my home will not remain safe, and others will suffer. Heavy knocks rattled the clinic's front door. The sound echoed through the small building like thunder. The nurse jumped, hand flying to her mouth. The warrior's expression hardened, jaw set. The door rattled again. A voice called out, cold, sharp. We are looking for an Apache. Tall, long hair, dangerous man. Word is, he came through this way. She stepped away from the entrance as if distance could protect her. Her heart pounded with the weight of the moment. She stared at the warrior. He remained still, watching her, waiting. She did not answer. She could not. The door swung open before she even reached the lock. 3 strangers stepped inside, boots heavy on the wooden floor. Their eyes darted around the room, taking everything in. They smelled like gunpowder and whiskey, rough men who had seen too many fights to care about one more. The leader, a man with a scar dragging across his cheek, smiled a crooked grin when he spotted the warrior, standing tall near the center of the room. There you are. But before the man could draw his gun, the nurse found her voice. He is my patient. She blurted out, surprising even herself. He is under medical care. You cannot take him. Not like this. The scarred man laughed, shaking his head. Folks often underestimate the courage hidden inside the quiet ones. Gammy said, we are not here for your permission. He reached for his belt, and the warrior's stance shifted. Not aggressive, no weapon drawn, but firm like a wolf guarding a den. Do not involve her, warrior warned. The other 2 hunters circled to the sides. The room felt smaller by the second. Corners shrinking under the weight of their presence. The leader stepped closer to the warrior, staring him down. You ran far, native, but not far enough. We take you back dead or alive. Makes no difference to me. The warrior stared back, unafraid. The nurse sensed pressure rising in the air, like a storm ready to break through the roof. She wanted to step between them, yet fear pinned her feet to the floor. The leader smirked and tilted his head toward her. Seems like the lady is already attached. Maybe she wants to keep you here for company. The warrior's eyes flashed with anger. He stepped forward, a voice like thunder rolling over mountains. You will not speak of her. The silence after his words felt dangerous. The hunters' hands twitched near their guns. But before steel could flash, the town sheriff's whistle pierced the air outside. The hunters stiffened. Sheriff is coming this way, the leader muttered to his men. We move now. They backed toward the door, but not before the leader pointed 2 fingers at the warrior. We will return tonight. Do not try to run. There is no place in this valley you can hide. The door slammed shut behind them. The warrior waited until the hoofbeats faded into the distance before breathing out. Shoulders tight. The nurse finally exhaled the breath she had been holding. Her hands shook so much, she pressed them against her apron to steady herself. What will you do when they come back? She asked quietly. The warrior turned to her, soaking wet hair dripping onto the floor. His dark eyes held something fierce and unbreakable. I protect those who protect me. You chose to stand with me, so I stand with you now. She swallowed hard. The weight of that promise scared her, yet it brought a strange comfort too. She did not want anyone hurt. She also did not want him taken away like a hunted animal. He stepped closer, his voice a calm warning. Danger changes people. It shows who they truly are. She wondered what the danger would show about her. Would she break under fear or rise above it? She never imagined herself part of anything heroic. She was just a nurse, someone who patched wounds and offered comfort. But today, the world demanded more from her than she ever thought possible. The warrior noticed her trembling and gently placed a hand near her shoulder without touching, as if asking silently whether she needed support. She nodded once, just enough for him to understand she was trying to be strong. "Night will fall soon," he said. "It might not be safe for you to stay alone." Her heart stirred, unsure if she should leave him or remain by his side. Leaving seemed like the smart choice, yet every instinct told her he needed help. And maybe she needed him too. She had not felt this alive in a long time. "Who are those men really?" she asked. He looked away for a moment. Gathering thoughts that held pieces of a painful past, they worked for a man who takes what he wants: land, power, secrets. He planned to control tribes by force. I refused. I stopped him once and he never forgave. So he hired wolves like them to hunt me. The truth made her stomach twist. The threat was not just 3 hunters. It was something bigger, like darkness spreading from far beyond Dry Creek. He leaned closer, speaking gentle again. "I will explain everything. But first, we must prepare. If you leave, they may chase you to force me to surrender. If you stay, we face them together." Her breath trembled. The choice was no easier now than moments before. A shadow crossed the window as dusk slid across the sky. The world outside grew darker. Lanterns flickered inside the clinic, lighting both their faces in warm glow. She felt a chill. Not from cold, but from knowing the night ahead would test every piece of courage. She had left. Her voice came out soft but firm. "I will stay." The warrior held her gaze for a long moment, respect shining in his eyes. He nodded once, sealing a silent pact between them. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the promise of trouble. The clinic door rattled faintly in the breeze. Somewhere in the valley, wolves howled. The hunters would return, and when they did, the battle for truth would begin. The nurse tightened her hands, ready or not. Tonight, everything would change. Night crept over Dry Creek like a blanket laid by unseen hands. Lamps flickered across town windows, casting golden squares of light onto dirt roads. The clinic stood near the edge of town, where the trees thickened and the sound of crickets carried clearer than voices. The nurse lit 2 oil lamps, placing one by the counter and one near the old iron tub. The shadows they cast made the room feel both safe and haunted. The warrior sat near the window, sharpening a long hunting knife using a stone he carried with him. Each scrape echoed softly, slow and steady, like the ticking of a clock counting down. She watched him from across the room, trying to understand the calm in his movements. Even after being hunted, even after wounds and threats, he never seemed nervous. It was as if he spent his whole life preparing for dangers others could not imagine. He looked up and noticed her staring. His voice came low, almost gentle. "Fear is not weakness. It is how you act while afraid that matters." She felt her face warm with embarrassment, though his tone held no judgment. She folded a bandage, trying to keep her hands from shaking. Before meeting him, she believed fear came only from shadows in her past, from mistakes she carried silently. Now fear had a new form, one that knocked on doors and rode horses with rifles. She broke the silence. "What happens if the sheriff finds out you are hiding?" Here the warrior paused his sharpening. "That depends on what the sheriff stands for. Law can protect, or it can serve greed. In some places, the difference is only the badge on a man's chest." She wondered which kind of law Dry Creek belonged to. She had only been in town a few months. Most people treated her kindly. The kindness was shallow if it vanished when trouble came. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Not loud like the hunters, gentle, familiar. She hesitated before opening the door. When she did, a young ranch girl stood outside, holding a basket of food wrapped in cloth. "Mama heard there was a hurt man here," she said with wide, curious eyes. She thought he might need supper. The nurse blinked in surprise. She did not expect anyone in town to offer help so freely. She thanked the girl and gently closed the door. When she turned around, She caught the warrior watching with a calm expression. "Not all fear us," he said quietly. "Some simply need to know who we are before they draw their guns." She set the basket on a small table and removed cornbread, smoked pork, and boiled potatoes. He approached slowly, as if respecting the space around her. She handed him a plate, and he accepted with a small nod of gratitude. He ate quietly, mannered, like someone raised with rules even in wild places. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "You asked earlier why I could not stay hidden forever. I owe you more of the truth." She nodded, heart already tightening with curiosity. He rested his plate down. "My people lived north of the river, close to the tall cliffs. We kept to ourselves. Traders came sometimes, farmers passed through, but we harmed no one. Then a man from the cities arrived, calling himself a friend. He offered tools, metal, horses, things we could use. In return, he asked for guides. He said he wanted to learn the land and map safe paths. We trusted him." He looked away, jaw tightening. But trust is dangerous when given to men with empty hearts. When he left, soldiers came. They brought papers claiming the land was sold. They said he owned the water and the hunting grounds. They forced families to leave, burned homes, and shot anyone who resisted. The nurse covered her mouth, shocked. She had heard stories of such things, yet hearing it from someone who lived it carved deeper. The warrior continued. "I led those who escaped. My brother wanted to fight. I chose another path. I stole documents from that man's camp, proof that he forged the deeds, proof that could stop him. That was when he placed a price on my head." She understood now. He was not hunted because he was dangerous. He was dangerous because he held the truth. "Do you have the documents with you?" He shook his head. "I hid them. If captured, they must not fall into his hands." Footsteps echoed outside. The nurse froze. The warrior set his plate aside, stepping into the shadows near the door. The footsteps paused, then faded away down the road. Likely a townsman heading home, but every sound carried threat now. She turned back to him. "Where did you hide them?" He looked at her, eyes deep with caution. "The place is known only to me and one other. If you knew, you would become a target too. I will not put that weight on you." The words stirred something in her, a mixture of fear, respect, and a strange warmth. She was not used to others protecting her. She had spent most of her life alone, stitching herself together without help. Yet here stood a man who treated her safety as something that mattered. She asked him a softer question. "Will your family be safe until this is finished?" He exhaled slowly. "My brother wants revenge. He may act before thinking. That puts everyone at risk. If I do not return soon, they might believe I am dead." The nurse wished she could offer comfort, but all she could do was stand close enough to show she listened. Outside, laughter drifted from the saloon. Boots stomped on wooden porches. Music spilled into the street. The town carried on while danger circled its edges. It's like wolves waiting for lamps to go out. The warrior stepped to the window again. The hunters will not attack while the streets are busy. They wait for darkness and silence. A creak sounded from the back door, barely audible. The nurse turned sharply, heart leaping. The warrior moved before she could blink, silent and swift. Placing himself between her and the sound, the door opened, but it was not a hunter. It was the sheriff, hat, low coat, dusty, lantern in hand. He looked at both of them with measured suspicion. "Evening," he said. "Heard strangers rode through earlier and asked about a native. Word around town is someone matching the description is in this clinic. Thought I should check for myself." The nurse opened her mouth, but no words formed. The sheriff stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. He glanced at the warrior, eyes narrowing. "You look like someone carrying trouble." The warrior stood tall, but said nothing. Silence stretched thick. The sheriff set his lantern on a table. "Now, I can help you, or I can arrest you. That depends on what kind of man you are." The nurse finally spoke. "He is a patient. He needs to recover. He harmed no one." The sheriff studied her face, searching for lies. Then He looked at the warrior again. "What are you running from?" The warrior met his stare. "A man with power and no honor." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "I know the type." The tension in the room shifted, but not fully toward safety. The sheriff walked closer, lowering his voice. "If you stay here, blood may spill in this town. I need to know if protecting you is worth that cost." The warrior answered without hesitation, "If I leave, innocent people will be used to capture me. If I stay, I can stop them myself." The sheriff drummed his fingers on his belt, considering. Finally he spoke, "I will not turn you in. But if those men return tonight, I will not fight your battles for you." The warrior nodded once. "I do not ask you to." The sheriff tipped his hat slightly, a gesture of reluctant respect. Then he left as quietly as he came. Leaving the lantern light trembling in his absence, the nurse leaned against the wall, relief and fear mixing inside her. The warrior returned to sharpening his blade. Their protection was not guaranteed. Their allies were uncertain. Their enemies were coming, as the night deepened. Distant hooves returned on the wind, slower this time, circling the outskirts of town like predators, testing fences. The nurse swallowed hard, standing beside him. "Whatever happens tonight, we face it together." He lifted his eyes to hers, calm but fierce, then stand ready. Outside, the darkness moved. Inside, the light held steady. The storm had only begun. The moon climbed higher, pale and cold, hanging above Dry Creek like a watchful eye. The streets slowly emptied as families shut doors and pulled curtains. Lamps dimmed one by one until only the saloon, the sheriff's office, and the clinic still spilled light across the dirt road. Inside the clinic, the air felt tight, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The nurse paced near the counter. Folding linens, she had already folded twice. She wasn't afraid of the warrior, but she feared what the world might force him to become when cornered. She stole a glance at him. He sat on the floor near the window with his back against the wall, knife beside him, hands resting calmly on his knees. He looked like someone trained not only to fight, but to wait. Waiting was sometimes the hardest part. She finally spoke. "If they attack, you don't have to face them alone. I can help." He shook his head slowly. "You are a healer. Healing is strength. Do not trade it for blood unless there is no choice." His voice carried no command, just truth. But something in her chest ached. She was tired of watching life happen from a distance. Tired of being useful only after the pain had already arrived. She turned to the window. In the distance, the howl of a coyote rose and faded. The warrior's eyes followed the sound too. "They are not coming now," she whispered. "They are waiting. For darkness. For fear they do not wait for fear," he replied. "They wait to see who stands beside me. They want to know if I am alone." She looked down at her hands, realizing how much her presence mattered, even if she held no weapon. The hours crawled by. Wind pressed against the windows, pushing dust beneath the doorframe. The lamp flames wavered. The warrior finally stood and walked to the back room where medical crates were stored. She followed him, curious. He pulled out a blanket and spread it on the floor. "You need rest," he said quietly. "And what about you?" "I will rest when I know there is no danger." She hesitated before lying down. The wooden floor was cold, but the blanket softened it. The warrior sat a few feet away, as if guarding her sleep. She closed her eyes, though her mind refused to calm. The sound of his breathing, slow and controlled, steadied her more than she expected. A strange comfort settled over her. Not safety, but something close to trust. She drifted asleep for a short while, but voices outside jerked her awake. Low, hushed voices, not townsfolk. She sat up, pulse racing. The warrior was already standing, silhouetted against the lamplight. His knife glinted as he gripped it tight. "They returned," he whispered. Boots scraped outside the wooden walls, followed by the quiet clink of metal. They did not knock this time. They tried to slip around the building instead, staying out of sight. The warrior stepped toward the door, ready to strike if they burst in. The nurse reached for his arm without thinking, not to stop him. but to remind him he wasn't alone. The intruders paused, their shadows sliding along the window. One man whispered something too faint to catch. The warrior moved silently to the opposite side of the room, preparing to flank them if they entered. She held her breath, afraid even the sound of her heartbeat was too loud. Then the footsteps retreated. No gunshots, no fight, just silent withdrawal into the dark. The nurse shivered. "They are testing us," she whispered. "Testing patience, courage, and fear," he replied. "Men like them strike when doubt grows." As dawn approached, the sky turned gray and pale blue. The clinic felt heavier, not lighter. She finally stepped out onto the front porch. The street was empty, but deep hoofprints marked the ground. The horses circled during the night, watching from afar. The warrior joined her outside, scanning the valley. The sun lit his face, and she noticed he looked more tired than he let on. "We cannot wait for the next attack," he said. "They will return with more men. They know I am here." "What do we do?" He looked toward the mountains where the ridges cut the horizon. It's like dark blades. "I must reach my people before they find them. I must bring the proof to safety." She felt a twist in her chest. If he left alone, he might not survive. If he stayed, the danger would swallow the town. He turned to her, voice softer than before. "I did not want to involve you, but you stand here because you chose to. If I leave, they may follow you to force me back." She stepped closer, hands trembling at her sides. "Then let me come with you. Let me help." His eyes widened slightly, not from surprise, but from the weight of what she offered. "The journey is dangerous. If we go, there may be no return." Her voice steadied. "I am tired of living small. If you carry this burden, I carry part of it too." Wind swept the porch, blowing strands of her hair across her face. He reached out slowly and brushed them back, careful not to cross a boundary. His touch was light, almost hesitant. "I do not want you harmed," he said quietly, "and I do not want you hunted alone." A moment passed, charged with meaning they did not name. Then the clinic door burst open behind them. The sheriff strode inside, holding a crumpled telegram in his hand. His face looked grim. "News just came from the north. A group of riders crossed the river yesterday. More than a dozen." He paused, eyes turning to the warrior. "They are not just hunting you. They are clearing every settlement tied to your people. Burning farms, pushing families out. Folks are scared to talk." The warrior's breath deepened, fists clenching. The nurse stepped toward him instinctively. "How long until they reach the canyon?" she asked. The sheriff shook his head. "Hard to say. Maybe a week. Maybe days if they push fast." The warrior closed his eyes, pain flashing across his face. "My brother will not run. He will fight. If he does, they will kill him and anyone near him." The nurse felt a chill run through her. She turned to the sheriff. "Will the town help the sheriff rub the back of his neck? Dry Creek barely protects itself. Folks don't want to die for a fight they don't understand." The warrior stepped forward. "I do not ask them to fight for us, only to stand aside." The sheriff nodded. "I can manage that. But if you leave, you'll be riding straight into danger." The warrior looked to the mountains again, then at the nurse. She understood without words. This journey had become more than survival. It was about truth, land, family, justice, and the fragile bond forming between two people from different worlds. He finally spoke. "I leave at sundown. She will come with me." The sheriff raised a brow. "You sure about that?" she answered before the warrior could. "I choose this." The sheriff exhaled, resigned. "Then I'll get you horses and supplies. But once you leave town, you're on your own." He stepped out the door, leaving the two of them alone under the morning light. The nurse looked around the clinic. It's the place that sheltered her when she first arrived in Dry Creek, the place that let her start over. She realized she might never return. The warrior moved to gather his things. She packed medical supplies, blankets, water, and anything that might save a life on the trail. They worked in quiet rhythm, each movement carrying purpose. As the sun lowered, the sky turned gold and deep red. The sheriff arrived with 2 horses, strong and well-fed. He handed the reins to the warrior and offered the nurse a solemn nod. "You're brave, miss. Just make sure it's for the right reasons." She mounted the horse with trembling legs, but steady resolve. The warrior mounted beside her, looking toward the mountains that waited like fate itself. Riders in the distance appeared again. Silhouettes against the dying light, the hunters. Far enough not to strike, close enough to follow. The warrior leaned toward her slightly, voice low. "They will track us the second we leave the valley." She held the reins tight. "I know." The first stars appeared as night rose from the earth. Together, they rode toward the wild, toward danger, toward his people, and the hunters followed, closing in like wolves on a trail that could decide the future of everyone caught between 2 worlds. They rode through the night, following the narrow trail that wound toward the mountains. The moon guided them until clouds rolled across the sky, dimming the path and turning the world into shadows and wind. The nurse kept close to the warrior, trusting his sense of direction more than the faint landmarks she barely recognized. Behind them, hooves echoed faintly, a reminder that danger was not far by dawn. The trail opened to a wide ridge overlooking a valley filled with pines. Thin smoke rose from scattered fires, not from towns but from camps. The warrior pulled his horse to a stop and looked down with a breath that sounded equal parts relief and worry. "My people are here," he said. "But if the enemy reaches them first, there will be no mercy." They rode down the slope together, branches brushing their clothing and horses snorting from the descent. As they neared the camp, figures stepped from the trees, spears and bows ready. The warrior lifted his hands to show peace. Within moments, a younger man rushed forward and pulled him into a strong embrace. He shared the same dark hair and sharp features, only younger and with fire in his eyes. "You are alive," the brother said, gripping his arm. "We heard rumors you were hunted. We almost went looking for you." The warrior looked at him firmly. "That would have played into their hands. I returned with purpose, not desperation." The brother glanced at the nurse, surprised to see her among them. She lowered her gaze with respect, unsure of the customs. He nodded in greeting, cautious but not unkind. The warrior addressed the gathered group. "They are coming for all of us. Not because we fought, but because we exist. They want our land, our water, our future. We cannot defeat them with force alone. We need proof. The truth we hid must be brought to the governor in the western city. Only then will the land and rights be protected by law." Murmurs rose, some hopeful, others doubtful. An elder stepped closer, her long hair braided with feathers and copper beads. She raised her chin and studied the nurse with deep, thoughtful eyes. "You travel with him," she said gently. "Do you stand for him, or for the world outside?" The nurse swallowed her fear. "I stand for what is right, not for one side or another. For peace. For a future where no one has to run." The elder nodded softly. "Then you are welcome here." Before they could plan further, a horn sounded from the ridge they had just descended. The enemy riders appeared again, now more than a dozen, spreading across the slope like wolves closing in. The brother reached for his weapon, but the warrior raised a hand. "We do not fight here. We protect the people and move. Battle will only bring death. Their victory is fear. Our victory is survival." The nurse watched the hunters approach, her heart racing, but she understood now. The goal was not to prove strength, but to preserve life and ensure justice reached those who controlled the future of the land. The villagers packed quickly. The elder placed her hand on the warrior's arm. "The documents are hidden in the canyon caves. You and your companion must go. The rest of us will travel east, where the hunters will not expect." The warrior nodded, then turned to the nurse. Ready, she mounted her horse with newfound resolve. Ready, they rode hard toward the canyon while the tribe dispersed. The hunters noticed and split their forces. Half followed the warrior and nurse, half circled toward the valley to search for others. The chase thundered across open plains, dust rising behind hooves, wind tearing through hair and clothes. The canyon appeared like a great crack in the earth, narrow at the entrance, but deeper within. They dismounted and hurried inside, leading their horses on foot through the stone walls. The air cooled, shadows thickened, and echoes followed each step. At the far end, the warrior knelt beside a small crevice hidden behind loose stone. He removed a leather-wrapped bundle tied with sinew. The nurse held a lantern steady while he opened it. Inside were maps, letters, and signed agreements showing the land was never legally sold, only stolen. This is what they fear. He said before they could leave, footsteps echoed from deeper in the canyon. The leader of the hunters emerged, gun drawn, eyes burning with hatred. "You should have stayed dead," he spat. The warrior stepped forward, unarmed. Placing himself between the hunter and the nurse, the man cocked his gun. The nurse felt her heart drop. The leader sneered. "People like you are meant to be forgotten. Land is for those who can take it." The nurse stepped forward, voice shaking but loud. "Land belongs to those who live on it, not those who steal it." The leader aimed at her, but the warrior lunged, knocking his arm aside. The shot fired into stone, sparks flying. The canyon echoed with noise. The hunter stumbled back and raised his weapon again, but the warrior grabbed his wrist. Forcing the gun away, the struggle ended when the warrior struck his opponent hard enough to knock him to the ground. The gun clattered across rock. The leader lay winded, unable to rise. The nurse stood frozen, breath shaking. The warrior looked at her. "It is over." The man on the ground glared. "You think this changes anything?" The warrior knelt beside him. "It changes everything, because the truth will reach those with power. Your lies end here." He stood, taking the documents. The hunter did not follow. Fight had left him. With the papers secured, they left the canyon and rode west, away from the hunters and toward the city. Days later, they arrived, dusty and exhausted. The officials listened, reviewed the proof, and dispatched legal riders to stop the land seizure. The stolen deeds were overturned. Tribes and settlers alike received protection under law. The hunters scattered, unable to act without support. Months passed. Dry Creek returned to quiet days and slow mornings. The nurse stayed in town, tending families and ranch hands, but she was no longer a stranger. People trusted her. The warrior visited often, bringing news from his people and helping her repair the clinic roof or fetch supplies. One evening, as sunlight faded across the valley, he stood beside her on the porch where everything began. The wind carried the scent of pine again. He looked at her with steady eyes. "You chose to stand with me when you had no reason to. You changed more than you know." She smiled softly. "I only followed the truth." He took her hand, careful and respectful, holding it as if it were something precious. "Then let us follow it together. It's not as hunted and healer as equals." She squeezed his hand in return. They watched the last streak of light sink behind the mountains. Dry Creek grew quieter. The nurse no longer felt alone. The warrior no longer carried the burden by himself. Their journey became more than survival, became a home made not of walls but of shared purpose and finally peace. And as night settled, the stars rose bright not as signs of danger, but as reminders that even the most untamed paths can lead to a place where hearts rest in safety. Their story ended not with escape, but with belonging, and the land remained free.